I still remember the way the morning light hit the bathroom tiles, that cold, quiet kind of brightness that doesn't feel warm at all. It was one of those mornings where everything looks exactly as it should but nothing feels right. I was brushing my teeth, trying to shake off the fog in my head when I saw it, a gray men's t-shirt lying just beside the laundry basket. Not in it. Not folded. Just there like it had been dropped in a hurry. At first, I thought maybe it was mine. I picked it up, half expecting it to be an old college tee I hadn't worn in a while. But the fabric felt too soft, too new. The size was smaller than mine, and the scent, faint but noticeable, was of some musky cologne I didn't own. "Kim," I called out, holding the shirt by the collar. She walked in just a second later, barefoot, wrapped in her robe, towel still hugging her damp hair. She barely glanced at the shirt before answering. "Oh, that's my brother's," she said, too quickly, like she'd been rehearsing the line. "He came by yesterday. Must have left it." Her voice was light, casual. She didn't blink. I blinked, though. Her brother? Chris? He lived nearly 8 hours away and hadn't visited in almost 6 months. He wasn't spontaneous either, always announcing visits weeks in advance. If he'd come over yesterday, it would have been a production, dinner plans, an air mattress in the guest room, beers in the fridge. But there'd been none of that. And the shirt? It was in the upstairs bathroom. Chris had never even used that bathroom. Guests never did. I didn't say any of this out loud. Instead, I watched her toss the shirt into the laundry basket like it was nothing, like it didn't sit there buzzing in my head like an unanswered question. "Don't be late for work, babe," she said with a smile, brushing past me and pressing a quick kiss to my cheek. I tried to mirror her ease, smiled, nodded, grabbed my bag, but my stomach had already started to twist in that low, sour way that lets you know something is wrong before your brain can catch up. As I drove to the office, I kept trying to rewrite the morning. Maybe I'd forgotten something. Maybe Chris had stopped by. Maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation and I was being paranoid. I even checked my phone at a red light, scrolling through recent texts to see if she'd mentioned a visit. Nothing. What unsettled me more than the shirt was how casually she dismissed it. Not the words themselves, but the speed. Like she'd been expecting the question. Like she was ready. It wasn't just the shirt either. If I was honest with myself, it was everything lately. The shirt just happened to be the first thing I could hold in my hand. I pulled into the office parking lot and sat there for a while, engine ticking softly, fingers still curled around the steering wheel. The shirt. Her tone. The way she smiled after brushing it off. None of it sat right. I knew what intuition felt like, most people do, even if they pretend they don't. And this? This wasn't a hunch. It felt like the opening scene of a story I hadn't agreed to be in. The rest of the day dragged. I went through the motions, emails, phone calls, meetings, but my mind wasn't in any of it. I kept seeing the shirt on the floor, smelling the cologne, hearing her voice say, "It's my brother's." I'd loved that voice for nearly 7 years, but this morning it didn't sound like her. It sounded like someone trying to sound like her. During lunch, I found myself scrolling through her Instagram, something I rarely did. Nothing strange, just the usual food pics, sunsets, a throwback from our anniversary trip to Santa Fe. But suddenly it all looked curated. Like a museum exhibit titled, "Happy Wife, No Suspicion." It made me uneasy. I checked her brother's account too. He'd posted pictures from a bar in Denver just 2 nights ago. No mention of being in town. No signs of a visit. I stared at one photo of him raising a glass with friends, the city skyline behind him. Then what was his shirt doing in my bathroom? That evening as I drove home, I told myself I wouldn't say anything. Not yet. I needed to think, to be sure, to not jump the G***N. Accusing someone, especially someone you love, without proof can cause damage you can't walk back from. I wasn't ready for that. But when I walked through the front door, Kimberly greeted me with a warmth that felt measured. Like someone had flipped the "everything's fine" switch to high. "Hey, how was work?" she asked, padding over to the kitchen. "Same old," I said, slipping off my shoes. "You?" She paused only for a moment. "Good. Just cleaned a bit, did some reading." I nodded. The laundry basket was no longer in the hallway. It had vanished sometime after I left. I didn't ask about it. Dinner was nice, too nice. She made lemon pepper chicken, my favorite, lit a candle, poured wine. We didn't usually do that midweek. She asked about my day, about work, and laughed a little too hard at the joke I made about Rick from accounting. Her phone sat on the table face down, screen silent. Always silent. We were halfway through dinner when I noticed she was wearing perfume, something floral and sweet. Not her usual scent. And her nails were freshly painted, soft lilac with little sparkles. "Trying a new color?" I asked, playing it casual. She smiled, glancing down. "Yeah. Felt like something different." "Different?" Everything was starting to feel that way. After dinner, she said she had a Zoom call with some friends from yoga. I told her I'd be in the garage checking on the shelves. She didn't ask any questions. She never used to be this nonchalant about our evenings apart. I sat on a work stool, staring at a box of old camping gear, and wondered how many signs I'd missed. How many little eyes had slipped past while I wasn't paying attention. The shirt was just a breadcrumb. A tangible one. But how long had the trail been there, invisible? I didn't know what came next. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to know. But that moment in the bathroom that morning, it split time. Everything before it and everything after. I didn't feel angry yet. I didn't feel betrayed. What I felt was a sense of unraveling. Like I'd tugged on a thread that led to the seams of my life. And the fabric was starting to give way. The thing about betrayal is it's never loud when it begins. It doesn't kick down the door and announce itself. It drips in, slow and quiet, through the cracks you didn't even know were there. I sat in my office the next day trying to work, but I kept drifting. That t-shirt, the easy explanation, the way she smiled afterward, it all looped in my head like a song stuck on repeat. But now, the more I thought about it, the more I started to connect dots I'd ignored before. Dots that now pulsed like warning signs in hindsight. I thought back to 2 months ago, maybe a little more. Kimberly had started going to bed later. At first, I assumed it was just stress or maybe a new Netflix obsession. She claimed she was reading more, winding down in her own way. That sounded reasonable. But the habit stuck. I'd fall asleep alone more often than not. She'd slip in hours later, careful not to wake me like a ghost. Then her phone. That was another thread I hadn't pulled on until now. It was always silent, always face down. She used to leave it around the house, laugh at my terrible autocorrect texts, even share funny posts she found. But lately? Her screen was a private world I wasn't allowed to see. Notifications vanished too fast. She never left it unattended. I remembered asking once, half joking, starting a secret life over there? She laughed and tossed her hair, saying if I were, I wouldn't be so obvious. But she was obvious. I just didn't want to see it. There was more. I started cataloging them in my head like files in a drawer, little changes I'd brushed off. Kimberly's wardrobe shifted. Not just an upgrade in evolution. She started dressing like a woman trying to impress someone new. It wasn't about style, it was about intention. Skin-bearing tops that I hadn't seen in years. Heels on a Sunday. Lingerie that wasn't meant for me. She'd say I just felt like treating myself. But the sparkle in her, I looked like something else. Then there were the wellness retreats. Those started about 3 months ago, weekend trips with friends to some spa or cabin for mental recharge. She'd come back glowing, rested, but distant. Like she'd lived a whole life while I was mowing the lawn and reheating leftovers. I used to welcome those weekends. Time alone. Time to think. But looking back, they were perfectly placed silences in our relationship. Days I couldn't account for. Times when I couldn't reach her. I tried once, called her on a Saturday evening to ask if she needed anything from home. It went straight to voicemail. She texted 2 hours later, sorry. Phone was off for meditation. I didn't question it. Why would I? I wasn't looking for proof then. But now? Now, every retreat felt like a chapter one hadn't been allowed to read. She also stopped inviting me to things. Little events, her friends' birthdays, coworker hangouts, even a wine-tasting night she'd once begged me to attend with her. One by one, I was excluded. She said it was to give me space. I know you hate these social things, she'd say, and part of me was grateful. But another part, the part one ignored, felt like I was being gently erased from her life. Even our conversations changed. I don't know exactly when it started, but the warmth faded. The inside jokes fell flat. Her laughter became scarce, and when it came, it wasn't with me. She was somewhere else, always just a little further than I could reach. I'd tell her about work, a funny client story, and she'd nod, eyes on her phone, not hearing a word. And I let it happen. That's the part that eats at me. I told myself marriage has seasons. I told myself she was just stressed or distracted or evolving. People change. That's normal, right? But it wasn't change. It was detachment. It was a careful unhooking of herself from our shared life. After the shirt incident, I started watching her more closely. Not in a creepy way, just observing. I started noticing how she smiled at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. How she'd delete her call logs before handing it to me to show a recipe or an outfit. How her eyes darted to the screen every time it buzzed, even if she didn't pick it up. I remembered a night from last month. We were out at dinner, celebrating my work promotion. She looked stunning, too stunning for a casual meal at a steakhouse we'd been to a dozen times. Her phone buzzed twice during the appetizer. She flipped it, glanced, then slid it face down on the table. Everything okay? I asked, cutting into my salad. Yeah, just group chat drama, she said, sipping her wine. Ignore it. But her fingers kept brushing the edge of the table like she wanted to pick the phone back up. Her laugh was polite. Her attention scattered. That night, she fell asleep early, leaving me to finish the bottle of wine alone. I watched her slip away then. I just didn't realize how far she'd already gone. Even the way she touched me changed. Less frequent. Less spontaneous. Mechanical, almost. A peck on the cheek here, a polite hug there. Passion disappeared. I blamed stress. I blamed work. I blamed myself. Now I blame reality. A reality that had been shifting around me while I stood still. By the end of the day, I had built a mental timeline, a quiet inventory of her distance. The t-shirt wasn't the beginning. It was just the first physical clue in a case that had already been tried and sentenced in her heart. I went home that evening with a different kind of awareness. Not paranoia, certainty. I didn't know the full truth yet, but I knew enough. Enough to stop dismissing the gut feeling. Enough to start watching carefully, not naively. She greeted me at the door, kissed me on the cheek, and asked if I'd eaten. I hadn't. She offered takeout. I declined. She asked if something was wrong. I smiled and said no. Because I needed time. Because something was unraveling, and if I pulled the thread too hard, too soon, I might lose the whole picture. She smiled back and disappeared into the living room. And I stood there, in the hallway, staring at the spot where she just stood, wondering how long it had been since I really knew the woman I married. I didn't plan on going to the reunion. Kimberly had brought it up months ago, some college event, an alumni mixer of sorts at a downtown hotel. She seemed excited about it in that way people are when they already have an outfit picked out. I remember her twirling slightly in front of the mirror when the invitation arrived, brushing her hair back, asking, "Do you mind if I go alone? You've always hated these things." I didn't hesitate. "Go have fun," I'd said. "Take a break." At the time, I meant it. Now, I wasn't so sure. By the day of the event, I already suspected too much. The shirt. The shifts. The growing wall between us. I didn't say anything when she got ready, didn't ask questions when she sprayed perfume I hadn't smelled in years, or when she double-checked her makeup 3 times before leaving. "Text me when you get there," I said. She looked at me for a beat too long. Of course. She never did. Around 8 p.m., I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at my phone, tapping the screen out of habit. No texts. No updates. The event was less than 30 minutes away and something inside me refused to sit still. I told myself I just needed to see. Not to start a fight. Not to catch her. Just to see with my own eyes if what I felt was real. I got dressed without much thought, slacks, a blazer, nothing fancy. On the drive there, I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. That she was mingling, having wine, laughing with old friends. That I'd find her and she'd smile, surprised but happy to see me. But that wasn't what I found. The venue was the ballroom at the Brookfield Plaza downtown. High ceilings, gold trim, glasses clinking against soft jazz from a corner band. People milled around in semi-formal wear, some catching up over champagne, others dancing. I walked in quietly, blending in. No one questioned me. I scanned the room, the faces, the shifting lights. And then I saw her. She was at a table near the far end of the room, back to me, laughing. Her posture was relaxed, her smile effortless. She looked radiant in a way I hadn't seen in months. And beside her, leaning in, whispering something into her ear, was him. I didn't know his name. I didn't need to. It was him. The same guy whose shirt was on my bathroom floor. He was younger, mid-20s maybe. Clean-cut. Confident. He wore the kind of smile that came from knowing he didn't belong there, but not caring. His hand hovered just a little too close to Kimberly's leg. Her shoulder angled toward him. They were lost in each other, even in a room full of people. I didn't make a scene. I didn't storm over. I just watched. For maybe 10 minutes, I watched her body language, her glances, the way her lips parted when she laughed. I had been replaced in real time, right there, in public, in plain sight. Eventually, the event host stepped up to the mic for some brief remarks. It was a short speech thanking alumni for coming, giving shout-outs to successful graduates. And that's when it happened. The host mentioned Kimberly, thanked her for organizing the digital marketing support team that helped promote the event. Then jokingly added, and shout out to the men in her life who let her be this amazing. Laughter. Light applause. But Kimberly leaned into her mic and quipped back, that would be my team. No strings, no stress. The room chuckled. Her companion smirked. I stood there frozen. No strings. No stress. That's how she referred to us. I turned and walked out. Fast, but not rushed. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me. I didn't want her to know that I'd heard it, seen it. Not yet. She had made her stage. I was just the background noise now. Or so she thought. An hour later I returned. Not to apologize. Not to reclaim her. But for the final act. While she was still mingling, still basking in her performance, I was announced by the same host she had joked with. He knew me professionally. He didn't know I was her husband. Before we wrapped the evening, we're honored to welcome a special guest, he said, motioning to the mic. Please give a warm round of applause for Justin Monroe, CEO of Vector Dynamics and recent acquirer of our very own local tech gem, Axion Creative. There were murmurs. Some light clapping. Kimberly's face fell. Axion Creative. Her company. The place she'd worked for 6 years. I stepped up to the mic, thanked the host, and looked across the room, locking eyes with her as the words rolled out. I'm proud to officially welcome Axion into the Vector family. I know many of you here have history with both firms. We believe in continuing the excellence your team has shown under Kimberly's leadership, and we look forward to supporting their future under new strategic direction. Silence. Except for a few gasps. Kimberly's eyes widened. The man beside her leaned back, visibly confused. And I smiled. The message was clear. I hadn't just seen her. I'd seen through her. I left without staying for the end. I didn't need to. That night I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat in my car, parked a block away, and let the moment burn itself into memory. The way she looked when the mic dropped. The shock. The humiliation. The realization that her secret life had collided with the one she'd tried to bury. It was done. Not the marriage. Not yet. But the illusion. It had become undeniable. The next morning, the house was quiet. Unnaturally so. Usually, I'd wake up to Kimberly rustling in the kitchen, reheating coffee, making too much noise with the drawers. But not today. Today, there was just silence and the sound of my own thoughts bouncing off the walls. I took my time getting out of bed. No rush anymore. No illusion to maintain. By the time I made it to the kitchen, she was already there, dressed down in leggings and one of those oversized sweaters she only wore when she wanted to appear soft, relatable, unthreatening. She was sipping coffee like it was just another Tuesday. Like the night before hadn't happened. Morning, she said, her voice carefully neutral. No guilt. No panic. Just normal. I didn't respond. She glanced at me, then back at her mug. About last night. I waited. I didn't know you were coming. The event, it was just supposed to be fun, nothing serious. Still, I said nothing. I wasn't trying to disrespect you, she added. It was just a joke. That was her opening move. The casual deflection. Start small. Minimize. Act like it wasn't a big deal. If she could keep it in the realm of awkward misunderstanding, maybe I'd play along. Maybe I'd fold. But I wasn't playing anymore. I slid a manila envelope onto the kitchen counter. Inside were the finalized divorce papers. I didn't even need to say it, just the sight of that beige rectangle made her freeze. I saw the pulse twitch in her throat. What is this? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. I think you know. She opened it slowly, like it might bite her. Her eyes moved across the page, then lifted to meet mine. You already filed? I already finished, I said. The lawyers will walk you through it. She laughed, bitter, surprised. You're serious. As serious as you were last night. That was when her calm cracked. Just a little. Her lips parted. Her shoulders stiffened. What about Maddie? She asked, reaching for the first shield she could find. Our daughter deserves better than this kind of marriage, I said simply. I've made sure her education fund is untouched. She'll be taken care of. Kimberly nodded slowly, processing. Her face shifted into that expression she wore in meetings when someone said something she didn't like but couldn't argue with. She was trying to stay composed, trying to find the angle. But there wasn't one, because everything was already in motion. Last night wasn't just a public humiliation. It was a declaration. And in the hours after, while she tried to recover in the echo chamber of her decisions, I'd been moving. Quietly, efficiently. The financial accounts, divided and locked down. Assets shifted into protected channels. Custody paperwork drafted. My name, my legacy, my daughter protected. I'd worked too hard to build the life we had. If she wanted to blow hers up, fine. But she wasn't taking me down with her. Kimberly tried to gather herself. Can we talk about this? Maybe just slow down. I almost laughed. You've had all the time in the world, I said. This didn't start last night. That was just the end of the performance. She said nothing. Maddie entered the kitchen a few minutes later, backpack slung over one shoulder, headphones around her neck. She looked between us, sensing the tension. Kimberly tried to play it cool, flashing a forced smile. "Morning, sweetie." Maddie just nodded. She grabbed a banana from the bowl and mumbled, "I'm ready for school." "I'll drive you," I said, already reaching for my keys. As we walked to the car, she didn't speak. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror, wondering how much she knew. Kids notice more than we think. Maybe she'd picked up on the late nights, the distance, the fake laughter. Maybe she hadn't, but she was quieter than usual. That was enough. "Everything okay, kiddo?" I asked as we pulled up to her school. She shrugged. "I guess." I waited, hoping she'd say more. She didn't. "Just remember," I said softly, "none of this is about you." She looked at me, then away. "I know." I watched her walk into the building before driving off. My hands gripped the steering wheel a little tighter than necessary. The fallout had big asterisk N. The ripples were spreading. Back home, Kimberly was on the phone. I didn't care who with, her sister, her lawyer, some friend from yoga who didn't know the real story. She stood in the hallway, pacing, voice hushed but agitated. I walked past her, upstairs to the home office, closed the door behind me. I spent the next few hours locking everything down. Email passwords? Changed. Shared cloud drives? Sorted, scanned, wiped. Every financial account restructured with legal oversight. Every asset traceable. I'd already hired a forensic accountant to ensure that if she tried anything cute, moving funds, hiding credit lines, I'd know before the ink dried. My lawyer called around noon. "She's going to be shocked," he said. "She already is." "Good. You've got leverage. You want to settle fast. Keep that pressure on." "I'm not out to ruin her," I said. "Just to make sure she doesn't ruin me." "Smart." We hung up. Downstairs, I could hear her moving through the kitchen, her voice occasionally breaking into frustrated fragments. I didn't go down. There was nothing left to discuss. No confrontation. No dramatic monologue. Just silence. That was the part she didn't know how to fight. Silence. She could have handled yelling. She could have handled tears, threats, pleas. But silence? That made it real. That evening she cooked dinner. As if we were still pretending. As if the air wasn't thick with everything unspoken. I didn't eat. She sat across from me anyway, cutting her food in small bites, pretending not to notice that I hadn't touched mine. After a few minutes, she set her fork down. "You know this isn't all my fault," she said quietly. I looked at her. "You were gone," she continued. "Emotionally. For a long time. It's like I didn't exist." I took a breath, let it sit, then said, "So you erased me instead?" She didn't respond. "Don't rewrite this," I added. "You don't get to set the narrative now." She looked away, lips tight. We sat like that until she gave up and left the table. That night I moved into the guest room. It was a formality at this point. We'd been living separate lives anyway. But the act of closing that door, of choosing my own space, my own breath, was the beginning of something new. Not healing yet. Not peace. But clarity. The fallout had big asterisk N. And I was ready. By day 3, Kimberly shifted tactics. The silence had held longer than she expected. No yelling. No door slamming. No breakdown. Just quiet systems locking into place, and my presence around the house like a glacier. Cold, unmoving, and impossible to ignore. That's when she stopped pretending nothing was wrong. It started at breakfast. She came into the kitchen just after Maddie left for school. I was halfway through my coffee, going over emails, when she planted herself across the table from me. "I think we need to talk." I didn't look up. "About?" She exhaled, already irritated that I wasn't playing along. "About what you're doing. The lawyers. The account locks. The silent treatment. You're being cruel." I set the mug down and looked at her. Calm. Flat. She hated that. "I'm being prepared," I said. "Cruelty is betrayal. This is self-defense." Her jaw tensed. "You act like you're this victim," she snapped. "But you've been emotionally absent for a long time. You never checked in with me. Never asked how I was doing. You just went to work, came home, and shut off." There it was. The blame. The first real push. I folded my hands on the table. You mean I didn't give you enough attention, so you decided to find it somewhere else? She flinched, but only slightly. That's not what I said. It's what you meant. Kimberly leaned forward, elbows on the table. You're trying to punish me. You're using money and power to trap me. No, I said. I'm making sure my life doesn't burn with yours. You're being vindictive, she said, eyes narrowing. You want me to suffer. I don't have to want that, I replied. You're already doing it to yourself. She stood abruptly, pushing the chair back with a sharp scrape. You think you're so righteous. Like you're above this. But you're not. I didn't answer. Just looked at her until she walked away, muttering something under her breath that I didn't care enough to catch. The rest of the week followed the same pattern. Accusation. Withdrawal. Reset. Repeat. On Wednesday, she cried. Not quietly. Not subtly. Loud, cinematic sobs that echoed through the house like a warning siren. She paced outside the guest room, hoping I'd open the door. I didn't. On Thursday, she shifted again, compliance. Apologies. Promises. I want to work on things, she said, cornering me in the laundry room. I'll go to therapy. I'll tell him it's over. You already made that choice, I said. No, I didn't. Not really. But I did, I said. Her expression fell like a building under demolition. And by Friday, she turned cold. If she couldn't win me back, she'd make me regret letting her go. The next week, HR at Axion requested a meeting. Not unusual, mergers breed chaos, but this one was about Kimberly. Apparently, she'd told colleagues she felt targeted since the acquisition. That her role had been strategically marginalized to damage her credibility. Classic. What she didn't realize was that I didn't manage Axion's day-to-day. I'd intentionally structured the merger so that she reported to an external operations director, someone with no prior knowledge of our personal situation. But her missteps were her own. Her late reports. Her missed deadlines. Her shift in team morale. She was underperforming because she was unraveling. Still, I didn't interfere. I didn't need to. I'd built the system tight enough to speak for itself. Everything documented. Every missed mark logged. No need for whispers or retaliation. Only accountability. At home, she started leaving books on the table about relationships. Emotional in * Macy. Forgiveness. She highlighted passages. Sticky notes on the pages, subtle as bricks. One read, healing is possible if both people are willing to do the work. I left it there. Didn't even touch it. Then came the email. Subject, let's be civil. It was a 3-paragraph essay on how we should model healthy separation for Maddie's sake. How we should discuss division of assets calmly. How we should avoid hostility. The kicker? She BCC'd her lawyer. I forwarded it to mine. No comment. The next morning she was all smiles again. She asked if I wanted coffee. Offered to cook breakfast. Said we should talk, just talk. I told her I was late for a call and walked out the front door. Later that night, she left the house dressed up. Said she was going to a networking event. I didn't ask. She didn't offer more. She returned just after midnight, heels in her hand, makeup smudged. She didn't even look at me when she passed through the hallway. I watched from the staircase in the dark. She was trying to provoke me. Trying to make me jealous or mad or desperate. It didn't work. Because I wasn't chasing. I wasn't doubting. I wasn't wounded anymore. I was watching. Watching her dismantle the version of herself she had spent years convincing me was real. The day after, I got a message from her direct report at Axion. Nothing dramatic, just an FYI that a contractor had filed a complaint against her. Unprofessional conduct. Excessive familiarity. Inappropriate boundaries. The contractor? Same guy from the reunion. The one whose shirt had kicked all this off. Turns out, once the dust from the merger settled, his position had been eliminated. Budget realignment. Temporary contract. Nothing personal. But apparently, the end of their thing hadn't been as quiet as she'd hoped. He told someone. Someone told someone else. HR got involved. Now she was the subject of her own professional unraveling. And me? I was miles away from the wreckage. Watching her tumble in the system she thought she could manipulate. The same system I'd built to outlive her influence. That weekend I took Maddie to the lake. Just the two of us. No tension. No performance. She smiled more than she had in weeks. I asked if she was okay. She said she missed how things used to be. I didn't lie. I said I did too. But I promised her one thing, that we were going to be okay. That we'd find something better. Quieter. Stronger. And as we watched the sun dip behind the trees, her head on my shoulder, I felt something I hadn't in a while. Peace. Because no matter how many times Kimberly tried to rewrite the story, to claw her way back into control, it was already too late. She'd lost the script. and I had no intention of letting her back into the writer's room. It didn't take long after the HR report for the rest of the illusion to crumble. The contractor, her friend, was let go once the merger completed. The role he occupied had always been temporary, a placeholder during the transition. Kimberly tried to pull strings to keep him on, but by then her influence had already started to evaporate. The affair didn't end in fireworks. It ended in silence. No dramatic goodbye. No final embrace. Just nothing. Like a door quietly closing in a hallway no one was standing in anymore. She didn't talk about him again. Not directly. But I saw it, how she'd linger by her phone scrolling. How she seemed more distracted, even anxious. She thought no one noticed, but I did. I always had. I just used to give her the benefit of the doubt. That was over. At work, people began to distance themselves. The same colleagues who used to greet her with warmth now offered forced smiles or polite nods. Meetings were more clipped. Her name no longer carried weight. When she joined Axion, she'd been a star, sharp, ambitious, charismatic. Now she was a cautionary tale, and the only one she could blame was herself. At home, she tried to act as though things could still return to normal. She cooked more, offered to run errands, made vague comments about trying again. But every move she made felt hollow. Like she was mimicking the life she used to have, hoping no one would notice the cracks. But I noticed. So did Maddie. The warmth in our house had long since faded, replaced by a mutual, exhausted quiet. And finally, she gave up the act. One morning, I found her sitting on the back porch, staring at the yard. No coffee. No phone. Just silence. I messed it all up, she said without looking at me. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The illusion was gone. The damage was done. And in its place was something brutal but honest. Truth. 9 months later, I live by a lake. Quiet. Peaceful. The kind of place where mornings start with birdsong and evenings end in firelight. Maddie's here with me most of the time. She's preparing for college now, applying to schools that make her eyes light up, places far from all of this. I'm encouraging it. She deserves a fresh start, too. I've gotten back into tech consulting. Nothing major, just helping small startups find their footing. It's fulfilling in a way my old job never was. No boardroom drama. No power plays. Just real people trying to build something good. My world is smaller now by design. Intentional. There are still echoes of what happened, of course. Kimberly is part of my life only through custody schedules and logistical texts. There's no animosity, just distance. She tried reaching out once, a long email full of reflections, regret, and subtle hope. I didn't respond. She's in the past. And the past no longer has keys to my future. What once felt like devastation has turned into something else entirely. Freedom. The kind that comes when you stop pretending. The kind that allows you to breathe again. There are nights I still think about how close I came to missing it all, to accepting less, to living quietly in someone else's lie. But those thoughts don't hurt anymore. They remind me of what I survived. And more importantly, of who I've become.